Welcome back to the Sweet Take. Today we are joined by Bloomberg's resident car culture expert, Hannah Elliott. From supercars to high fashion, she covers everything fast, loud, and luxurious. Whether she's at Le Mans, reviewing the latest Ferrari, or just breaking down the fashion of the grid, Hannah's here to remind us that car culture is culture. Hannah, so great to meet you, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Natasha. It's such a pleasure to speak with you. I'm a big fan of your work.
Thank you. Why don't we first start with just introducing you to our audience? Can you tell us a bit about who you are and the work that you do at Bloomberg?
Sure, I am the Bloomberg staff writer and car columnist for Pursuits, which means that I get to cover all of the fun cars, the motorsport, the culture, the collectibles, anything in the luxury sphere. I like to say that while most people write about how to make money at Bloomberg, I write about how to spend your money, which is the fun side of it. Yeah, and it's funny, I've been in this business for almost 20 years. Before I was at Bloomberg, I was at Forbes writing about basically the same thing. So yeah, I write about the fun stuff, all things cars.
That sounds like an amazing career and very fun as well. So, of course, you've covered many endurance events like Le Mans, and I feel like endurance is having a moment, in F1 specifically, because we keep hearing drivers who are transitioning from F1 into endurance racing, like Kevin Magnussen, Jenson Button, Nick DeVries, Mick Schumacher, the list goes on.
Yeah.
Why do you think endurance is such a natural step for F1 drivers?
It's a really good question. I was thinking about this. I think the most immediate and human answer is that excellent drivers want to drive and they want to drive anything and everything. So there's an innate desire in these guys to climb the next hill, dominate the next track. It's just a personal goal. Even Max has said, he's training to potentially join a 24-hour race in Germany that I think we're going to talk about later. He puts it in the terms of just it's a personal goal. These guys are obsessed with motorsport in general. And so I think endurance racing is just another outlet. It is very niche, especially for American viewers, but within the motorsport world, it's so prestigious because these guys are really athletes and their focus and their just mental and physical abilities are really put to the test with endurance racing in a way that isn't the same in Formula One. So I just think it's like a natural personal thing. They want to prove themselves in another area. And then also, let's face it, Formula One has 20 seats, not that many opportunities for drivers. Endurance racing has a lot more seats. These are team races, usually might have 3 drivers. So there's just a lot more opportunity to also drive. And at the end of the day, that's what these guys want to do. They want to drive.
Definitely. I think you're right. In the US and in North America, endurance racing is not as watched as perhaps other parts of the world. But I know that there is this like mystique about it.
Completely.
And how would you describe that for someone who's never actually watched one of these races? Because there's like a magic about it.
There is, yes.
What kind of words would you use to describe that?
I would use magic. And it's really interesting that you mentioned that because this is so apropos that we're talking about it. I currently am working on a story about the rise of motorsport for Business Week. Justin Bell, who I interviewed for that piece, used the word magic. There's a magic to it. Jenson Button, who I spoke with at Le Mans, he was racing there, literally told me he would rather win Le Mans than the Monaco Grand Prix. So there's something old world. It's extreme. Yes, it's obscure, but the flip side of that is extremely elite. It's very elite. It's very exclusive. It's old. I mean, the 24-hour Le Mans has been run since, I think, 1923. It's old. It's European. It's this thing that we always have, which is Americans have the youth and like maybe the money, but Europe has the old world prestige and the gravitas. And endurance racing is so European, even though obviously there are endurance races everywhere. It's like when the European royals would try to marry into like the American new money. It's like there's something that we want from them and something they want from us, and it's like a happy marriage. The fact that it is still obscure makes it feel in a way more special. Like it's, if you know, you know. If you're on the inside, you get it. And it's not overrun with influencers and corporate sponsors and like crazy hype the way F1 is. So it still feels a little special, like you're getting in on something early, like a cool indie band or something.
Oh, I like how you
Yeah.
described that. Does the slower pace of endurance change the way that you tell stories about it?
That's a great question. Yes, I think so. It's a lot more it's more nuanced. The rules are really difficult to wade through. Even I don't get all the rules. The rules change a lot. There are so many different classes within endurance racing. I mean, obviously the hypercar class is the premier, but there are GT3 classes within that. There are lots of other segments that are all racing at the same time. So it's way more complicated. And as a reporter, you are kind of trying to like wade in and pick out stories. It takes more teasing the strand of the story along rather than in Formula One where it's pretty obvious. You've got a driver and you've got a constructor and it's very clear. Endurance racing is a lot more nuanced and complex. So you are sort of digging and fishing for different stories maybe than just this is the person who won or the team that won this one race.
Yes, I watched Spa for the first time this year, and I remember I watched it until midnight. I went to sleep. I woke up again and it was still on. And
Incredible.
while I was watching it, it's very complicated because there's just so much happening. There's way more drivers, there's more teams, there's like more going on that I found myself constantly having to look things up.
Yes.
And I'm also wondering, like, are journalists and reporters, I'm assuming you take shifts when you report on this. You're
Yes.
not up 24 hours.
Right, right. I will very openly admit I did not stay awake the whole race in June when I was there in the summer. And really, for a lot of us, our reporting is done the week ahead of the race. So I think I got there on Tuesday and I was interviewing drivers and executives and team owners and engineers in the days during practice rounds, qualifying, and the days leading up to the race. So that by the time the race actually starts, you might have already filed a story, you might have already been on TV or radio talking about it, talking about the race or doing interviews. A lot of the heavy lifting is already done before the race even starts. And then, during the race, you're following it, at least for me. Now, I'm not going to write the breaking news story of who wins Le Mans. I'm doing more feature and cultural stuff. So the pressure's kind of off when the race starts. After the race finishes, then I might have one or two more pieces. I went to the 24 Hours of Daytona a few years ago and it was raining and pretty miserable. And I don't even think I stayed till the end of the race. The other funny thing is at Formula One races, they're huge media centers and there's a whole media corps that travels around with the teams basically to every race. And those guys, they're not out on the track during the race. They're in the media center generally. And I think that's so ironic. And I find I'm kind of in between. Sometimes I'll watch a race in a media center. Sometimes I prefer actually to be out in the track, like in the pits, watching from the sidelines. But a lot of the really hardcore motorsports reporters who write about motorsports for their entire beat, they watch all the races on TVs in the media center, which I think is really ironic. But,
Yeah.
that's actually the best way to watch the race. Obviously, you hear commentary and you can see every detail. As you know, if you're in the stands, you don't see all that much all the time.
No, but your other senses are elevated,
It's
obviously, with the
very true.
sound and the
I think you need
smell and
both
everything else.
completely. You need the color and the life and the taste, and you're right, the sounds and the smells of actually being there. Sometimes the commentary isn't really what you need.
Is there a memory that's a favorite memory that stuck with you from one of the endurance races you've been at last few years?
Well, I mentioned the rain of the Rolex 24 hour. I would say this year at Le Mans was really special because I held off going to Le Mans for years because I had always been told you camp out and you stay up all night and you're just drinking beer with a bunch of British frat bros. And I was like, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound really fun. It just doesn't sound fun. But this year I found an Airbnb with a local French couple in the town of Le Mans. And I stayed at their house, and every morning, practice rounds and qualifying, I would get up and take the train, their little house in town, and there's a little trolley that goes straight to the track. And I really recommend that. It's very doable, it's charming, it's sensible. You avoid all of the traffic. And it was a really nice memory just being in the morning. Most of the people in the train were not going to the race. They're normal French people going about their day, but I'd get a coffee and then just ride my way into the track. Those memories I have of just riding the train in the mornings were really wonderful.
That sounds awesome. I mean, I'm on the same page as you, by the way. We went to the Austrian Grand Prix last year, and it was the same thing. You can camp. I had a bit of
Yeah.
culture shock when I first went. Actually, I could not believe the party that was happening there. And
Yes.
while my husband would probably want to do that, really enjoyed staying in our Airbnb and taking like the very small back roads in. It was very cute. So I can
Yes.
definitely relate to that.
I think maybe as a woman, it's actually an advantage that we don't feel that we have to prove ourselves as car guys. I never felt the need. I don't even know what that term means. It doesn't mean anything really. Like it doesn't mean anything. And there's always sort of a litmus test, I think, especially for men to somehow prove that they're hardcore. And I never felt that, which is great. And it does free you up to think about other solutions to watching races or to going to a 24-hour race that you don't necessarily want to be camping, drinking beer, all night. Yeah, so I can really
Yeah,
relate to that.
for sure. So, endurance has been in the news a lot recently because Max
Yes.
Verstappen, raced under a pseudonym. It was very secretive. He's going to be driving in the Nurburgring later. So, can you tell us what you know about this whole situation?
Well, I have to say I don't have any insider knowledge, but I do know he was racing as Franz Hermann, I believe was the name he came up with, which he came up with that name said because it sounded very German. And the whole idea was Max owns a racing team called Verstappen.com Racing. And one of the teams that they support, Emil Frey, had a Ferrari that I think he initially said he was going to shake down on the Nürburgring track. Turns out he was working toward getting his Class A driver's license. I think it's called like a Permit A license, which would enable him to race in the Nürburgring 24-hour, which is a really interesting race. As you know, Red Bull has cleared Max to potentially race in that race, which is really exciting. Max has said it's a personal dream of his. Just like we spoke about earlier, this is just something that like race car drivers like to do. And it's not really a new thing. Starting with Jackie Stewart, Jackie Ickx, Fernando Alonso, of course, has won multiple championships, both in endurance racing and Formula One. Jenson Button, of course, I mentioned, has won a F1 race and he's racing Le Mans. So this isn't really a new thing. Max is just the latest. And they haven't officially announced that he will be entering the 24-hour Nürburgring, which happens in May 2026. But it's looking like he will. Red Bull has cleared him. He now has his Permit A driver's license. He's actually racing there this weekend. I don't know if you saw the news. He's racing there this weekend in a 4-hour race. So everything is really aligning to that. And my theory is that he is actually walking toward driving in Le Mans. I think the 24-hour Nürburgring race, it's a little bit slower than Le Mans. It's less intense. It's less prestigious. There's less pressure on him. So I could see how they're walking him toward doing that. And then if he does well in that, then he tries to drive in Le Mans, which would be really exciting. And, Max is so interesting to me because he doesn't care about anything but racing and his family. And people try to put all this stuff on him. Just remember when F1, the movie came out and they wanted him to be at the movie premiere and he didn't want to be there. To me, he comes off as just a very simple guy. He loves racing and he loves driving and he loves his family. And there's not much more to it than that.
Yes, it's super exciting. I hope that your prediction is right and that
I hope
he,
so too.
drives in Le Mans. Why don't we switch gears a little bit, Hannah, and let's rewind a bit. How did you fall in love with cars and this field that you're in?
You know what? It was a slow burn. And the truth is, I always say this, I'm not actually a car person. I think that has actually probably changed over the years, but this whole thing was an accident. I went to college and studied journalism and graduated with a journalism degree. And I had actually started my career writing about politics and religion. And this was very early on in my first year after college. Did not grow up around cars. My family was into sports, big running and basketball, though not involved or interested in cars in the least. But when I moved to New York, I answered a job listing on Craigslist for Forbes magazine. And the editor needed someone to be an assistant editor with car coverage. And he needed someone who was a properly trained journalist, not someone who could take apart an engine or, fix a gasket. And I think he had lots of those type of people, but he didn't have a properly trained journalist. And I remember him telling me, it's a beat like any other beat. You'll learn the beat. What's important to me is that you're trained as a journalist and you can communicate well. And we need someone who can write like you're going to explain it to your mother or grandmother. We don't we don't need someone who's writing, for road and track about the minutia of a turbo engine. So I took the job at Forbes because that was a great brand at the time and I wanted to get my foot in the door. And, For years I would just say, I'm not a car person. This is my job like any other job. I think over the years I secretly kind of fallen in love with cars too. I own some old cars and I love motorsport. So that's, I guess, the answer to your question. It's not something I planned, but I did hope to become a journalist. And that is what I'm most proud of, that within my beat and within my career being a journalist, I could write about this amazing field and this amazing segment that is really having a new glory day era. I think obviously in the 70s and era, it was very 70s and 80s, it was very cool and sexy and glamorous and all of that. But I actually do think now is an extremely exciting time in motorsport. I think all forms of motorsport are really elevating, especially for American audiences. And it's really fun. And I actually think it's an asset to not have come from a car background, because that inevitably sways just your perception. So I've liked acquiring the language and the skills and learning car culture along the way.
Are there certain aspects of car culture that you've grown to love more than others, whether that's, the energy around it, the design aspect? Are there certain aspects that maybe a more special place in your heart?
I love the competitive nature of people in cars. This may not be like the most heartwarming, but I love that. I love it when drivers get competitive. I love it when car executives get competitive. I love that Porsche wants to be Ferrari. I love that Porsche doesn't want to lose. So like sometimes they won't race in endurance racing because they don't think they can win. So they just won't race for the whole series. Like that. That to me is so interesting. I love the stakes. I love when people will stop at nothing to win, to compete, to show their dominance. I love when people go off script and are really
Hmm.
themselves and really human. And I think that is obviously that's what Drive to Survive gave us. I think as more motorsport series elevate, we're going to get more of that. It's interesting. Some of the Formula drivers that I've had a chance to interview, they're very guarded or they're not incredibly interesting to talk to because all they do is drive, and they're very risk averse off the track. And they're very guarded. So what I love is when even Max, you kind of get the feeling he says what he thinks. So I love that aspect of it, that cars really bring out a lot of emotions in people. Even something like the Cybertruck. Not a fan of the Cybertruck personally, but I love how little kids love it, and I love how a lot of people hate it and love to bash on it. Great. It's like it brings out the emotions on both sides.
Love that. So, of course, you're very well known for many of the car reviews that you do. So, can you tell us a bit about what your process looks like when you get an assignment to cover
Sure.
this next new
Sure.
car?
Sure. I try to approach the new vehicle with basically no knowledge. Most of the press cars that I test, they come to me one of two ways. They're either dropped off to my home and I have them for a week here in LA and I might drive them around to Palm Springs or Ojai or wherever, or I'll go on a press launch and drive the car somewhere nice or somewhere on a track. And usually press launches, there are executives there and engineers who can answer questions about the car. I just go in very open. I want to put the car into the correct context, and I want to understand the conditions that birth the vehicle, why it exists, and what it's intended to do. So I'm a big believer that cars should be fun, but they should also be the right tool for the job. There are some wonderful cars that I would love to drive to Las Vegas, but I would never take on a back road up a mountain highway. It's all about the right tool for the job. So in general, I try to evaluate the vehicle based on what does it promise if you buy it and drive it? Does it live up to that promise? Is it priced fairly for what it gives you, for the value of it? Does it bring out any sort of emotions? Is it thoughtfully laid out inside? And that's a big one, as more tech is inside our cars. It's interesting. There have been some moments lately where automakers actually walk back some of the more advanced technologies because they realize consumers don't actually need or want this thing. Like, for instance, Mercedes in their steering wheels, they have like a very nice roller toggle thing that you use with your thumb to adjust volume. And in some of their latest models, they took that out and they made it like a screen, but consumers didn't like it. So now for
Mm.
their new GLC, they put back in the roller toggle, which is like the tangible thing that people really like. So I think about those things. And then I just try to use the car in whatever capacity they're intended for. Obviously, if you're in a Lamborghini, you want to drive fast. You want to drive empty roads. You want to maybe get it on a track. If you're in SUV, maybe I'll try to haul some things or go to buy some plants or a nursery or put my dog in the back. I try to just really use it for the way that it's intended and evaluate it based on that.
I'm on the same page with the toggle. The toggle makes so much sense. I
Right?
was imagining this when you were saying like that.
Yes.
Like, what happens if like your skin also changes if it's dry or hot? It's more
I
sweaty or
completely.
less.
Yes. Or if you're wearing gloves, for instance, it's a complete nightmare. I completely agree. There's some things that are just very tangible and satisfying because they're tangible. That's another thing. Like when I'm evaluating a vehicle, I don't really want somebody from the automaker to be there to show me how to use things. I need to know how intuitive they are. So
Mhm.
sometimes with certain cars, the automaker will try to send somebody along with to deliver the car to like walk me through it, which a light touch is fine, but I actually prefer to discover the car myself because that gives me a better basis to judge whether the car is intuitive or not.
Yeah, and not insert any bias from the manufacturer.
Completely.
Yeah.
Or any just coaching about, some of that is fine, but if somebody needs to like sit in the car with me for 30 minutes to go through really unintuitive things, I'm not sure that's the best technology.
Yeah. Has there been a car that you reviewed that changed your mind on either performance or luxury?
That's a good question. I'm thinking of one that it didn't really change my mind, but the Fiat 500.
Hmm.
Now, that is not a luxury car, but it was so delightful. I don't know. I wouldn't say that it changed my mind, but it's a great example of something that is not a quote unquote luxury car. And the price point is relatively accessible. It's not an especially like high quality vehicle, but it's so charming and delightful and gets the job done. I just had the most fun driving that car. And when I got into it, I did not expect much. I just thought it's basically going to be a golf cart. And it was so peppy and so fun to drive. And the one I had was actually an electric one. It was the electric 500. It was a nice eye opener because I thought this is a great use case for electric technology. It's obviously a city car, which is kind of where you would want a EV anyway. It was just delightful. So that's actually what first popped into my head when you asked that.
Okay. I was just in Italy and there's probably one and two cars in Rome are Fiat 500s. They kind of make sense because
Yeah.
you gotta like zip
Yes. I
around
mean, the
and
Italians know what they're
EV.
doing.
Yeah.
Completely agree. They don't get it wrong. Just no stress. Sometimes you get into cars and it's rather stressful because a lot of sports cars, as you know, are very low to the ground. So I never want to curb it or scrape the splitter on big hills. And it is a little bit nerve-wracking. So something like that was just really easy.
So before we transition into kind of like culture and fashion, one last question on cars. So what is the most over the top car that you've driven? And what made it over the top?
Well, I've driven some Bugattis. I've driven Rolls Royces, everything that Rolls Royce has. So those are probably the most expensive cars. I've driven a Rimac Nevera. I've really been fortunate. I've driven Pininfarina Battista. I feel very fortunate. I've driven like all of the very $1 million cars and supercars. But a car that really felt just like a lot was the Lamborghini Revuelto, which is I think I want to say maybe 1100 horsepower car. You can fact check me on that. It's over 1,000 horsepower hybrid car. And the doors open upward, like gull wings. And it's just a lot. It has a presence. When you say over the top, the Revuelto is over the top. It's got an attitude problem. And I love it. It just, especially as a woman, people do not expect you to get out of that car. So it was really fun. It felt like a spaceship. It looked so incredible, so fast. I got a speeding ticket in that car and it was almost worth it. It was just everything so tangible, felt super modern, but also still felt like you were connected with the car, like it wasn't just a computer screen.
And you talked about how you like to drive cars in their environment to get a real sense of it. So were you taking this
Yes.
car to the movies, the grocery store, or where were you driving it?
I took that car. I drove it from Los Angeles up to Carmel, California. So that was like a 5-hour drive, and then I drove I drove it around Carmel. And this was during Monterey Car Week, which leads into Pebble Beach. So I drove it up and then drove it around Carmel. Wasn't great driving around Carmel, only because it's such a long car. And I, of course, am paranoid about getting in any sort of fender benders or dinging it. So that was a little more like stressful. I was driving very slow and carefully. But the drive up was just on one of California has these great highways. That really felt like what the car was intended to be. And I just remember driving up in the morning. It was like a Tuesday morning, so no traffic, sunny, dry. It was just wonderful.
Oh, I'm just imagining the juxtaposition of driving along Big Sur and then the anxiety of parallel parking, something like this.
Yes. No, it was not. It was stressful. Yes, stressful.
Yeah, very nice. So I want to transition into kind of what you think is happening in like crossover culturally with car culture, motorsport, fashion. What's your take on like the growing overlap of all of these areas and then, brands wanting to enter and, build partnerships and do work in this space?
Well, it's fascinating to watch. And in a way, we've never seen anything like it. I was just looking at the numbers. And according to Bloomberg, F1 right now has a $2 billion sponsorship market alone, which is incredible. So obviously, all of these brands, all of these companies want to get in on it. It's like the Super Bowl every weekend in terms of brands and ad potential. So on the one hand, we've never seen anything like it because it is so hyped and so prevalent. And there are so many channels now with social media that you can just blow out all of this marketing content and partnership content and sponsorship content, which is huge. I saw F1 is up to well over 1 million viewers averaging per race. That's far higher than it's ever been, and I think that will continue. So there's a lot of potential interest has never been higher, but also it's interesting because we have seen fashion collab with Formula One since the 80s. I mean, United Colors, Bennett was partnering with a racing team back then. I think it was called Tolman. Versace and Lamborghini were doing things in the 80s. I know Hermes and Bugatti. I don't think Bugatti was in F1, but there have been plenty of cars and fashion collabs, of course. Tag Heuer, we can't forget Tag Heuer has been around since the 70s in motorsport. So it's always kind of been there, but certainly this is on a whole new level. I just did a story on non-alcoholic beverages and motorsport, which is another really interesting thing where it actually makes perfect sense. There's a company called French Bloom that has a sparkling wine that they just partnered
Yes.
with F1. Yes. Yeah. And that makes actually perfect sense that they would be partnering as a non-alcoholic alternative because obviously you don't want alcohol and driving mixed, but you do want something that feels like a celebration. And I think that fashion also feels like a very happy partner with motorsport because it's glamorous, it's sexy, it's slightly dangerous. I don't think we can forget the element of danger. That does lend some of the allure. I don't think it's for every brand. With some brands, it just feels a little too forced, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was a 2 billion pot in terms of like potential dollars, but obviously the
Wild.
number of brands that have entered, even just use the number of logos you see on the cars, on the drivers' suits and everything is just they're
Exactly.
fighting for space on there.
Completely. And drivers that are changing helmets every race, that's still like even more opportunity. So it's literally head to toe to car. Like the possibilities are kind of endless.
Why don't we wrap with just a milkshake tradition, which is called Checkered Confessions? It's just a handful of questions, and I essentially just want to hear what your gut reaction, like first instinct is. And of course, there's no wrong answers.
Okay, I'm
Are you
ready.
ready?
Ready.
Okay. Le Mans weekend or Monaco Grand Prix?
Monaco. I have to admit, I think Monaco is a great race for fans because you can be kind of anywhere in the city and see some of the race. Le Mans is fun, but honestly, I'd still say Monaco. It's such a bucket list. It's glamorous. It's exciting. It's cool. Monaco.
Okay. Dream motorsport and fashion collaboration.
I would love to see a Le Mans hypercar with a livery by Etro. You know the fashion house Etro?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I don't know if you saw their recent 2026, I think it's spring 2026 runway collection. So many prints and so many textures and really cool design. I would love to see an Etro livery on a Le Mans hypercar.
I think you called it. Someone needs to pitch that to them.
Can we? Please.
Yes,
Please.
it would crush it on
It'd be really
everything.
cool.
It
Yeah,
would be.
I would be here for that. And also like I could see maybe some driving gloves in the Etro collection, maybe a cool leather jacket. You know, there could definitely be like it could go both ways.
Okay, next question. Is there a car that you would never drive again?
There's a car that yes, the answer is yes, and I didn't even drive it. I sat in it and it's the worst car I've ever sat in. It's the Aston Martin Lagonda. This is an old car. It was made in the 70s up till the 90s, and it looks like it's a square. It's an Aston Martin. It's a long four-door V8, and just sitting in it gave me the worst attitude I've ever had. It was so uncomfortable and so not ergonomic. I didn't even drive it. I don't want to drive it. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had to get out.
I'm gonna have to look this
So
up.
yeah, look it up. Aston Martin Lagonda.
Okay, you've been to many car events, car races around the world. Which one would you say is most underrated that you would recommend someone go?
Interesting. I would say this isn't a race. I would go to Retromobile in Paris. Retromobile is a big car show that happens every year in Paris. And it is old cars and new cars and components and just a bunch of like crazy car people. There's a lot of racing memorabilia. There's a lot of racing paraphernalia. I love any excuse to go to Paris, and Retromobile happens over a couple days. It changes locations, but most recently it's been in this like convention center thing in Paris. It's also coming to the US, which I haven't been to that one, so I can't recommend it yet. But yeah, I would check out Retromobile.
I like the name. And also pairs it has to be chic, so I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a great event.
unbelievably.
Yeah.
Yes, I recommend it.
Nice. All right, last one. One thing fans should pay more attention if they watch an endurance race.
Oh, an endurance race. You know, I love paying attention to the people calling the shots in the pit, in the garage. If you're able to tune in to listen to what they're telling the drivers, I find that so interesting because that's when you really start to understand race strategy. I'm still learning about management of the cars and fuel and tires and all these other components and all of these other factors that go into winning, especially an endurance race. There's so many variables. So anytime I can pay attention to the conversations happening between team managers, team directors, team principals, the people during the race, what they're saying to each other and to the driver, that I find the most fascinating.
All right, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing with us that car culture is so much more than just engines. It's emotions, it's how you feel, it's, everything around it. And so excited and happy to chat with you today. And for everyone listening, until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.